Have you ever wondered what happens when pure propaganda meets reality? Well, take a good look at what's happening here. A Russian tank has just fired and now needs to retreat to protect itself. But look at this. Instead of reversing quickly, it turns all the way around, exposing its rear, the most vulnerable part of any tank. Why? Its reverse speed is so slow that turning around is faster than backing up. And look, it flees in a straight line without seeking cover, completely exposed. Boom! That scene you just saw exposes a harsh reality for Russia. This tank is none other than a T-90M Prorif, the same tank that Putin declared to be the best tank in the world. The same tank that Russia calls invincible, the crown jewel of its arsenal. What you just saw, well, it wasn't luck, it wasn't an accident, it wasn't an isolated case. Russia bet so much on this tank that it spent almost a year keeping every new unit that came out of the factory. They were waiting, planning to launch an attack that would change everything. And when that moment finally came, something absolutely unbelievable happened. For you to really understand this story, I need to show you something that happened in February of 2024. On the 16th of that month, Putin visited one of Russia's largest tank factories, Uralvagonzavod. Cameras were on, recording everything. He took this opportunity to make a bold statement saying, "The T-90M Prorif is the best tank in the world." According to him, when this tank approaches a position, no one stands a chance. It shoots farther, is more accurate, and has better protection. It was a big promise, and Putin wasn't alone in this story. Rostec, the state-owned company behind the development of this tank, also praised the T-90M a lot. But they made a revealing mistake. They put the T-90M in the same category as two other tanks, the T-72 and the T-80. Two tanks that had already been destroyed in large numbers in Ukraine. Now stop and think about that for a moment. If the best tank in the world is in the same category as tanks that explode easily, well, that says something, doesn't it? But let's give credit where it's due. On paper, the T-90M looks impressive. It has a 125mm cannon that fires not only regular ammunition, but also guided missiles. These missiles can hit targets 5 kilometers away. That's a huge range. Its protection comes from a system called Relict. It's a state-of-the-art explosive reactive armor. When a missile hits the tank, this armor explodes outward, trying to neutralize the attack. At least that's what it's supposed to do. The tank also has an electronic protection system. Those unmistakable red eyes in front of the turret. They emit infrared signals to confuse older missiles. And there's one more detail. A small detail that will become very important later. The reverse speed of the T-90M is only 4 kilometers per hour. It's slower than a person walking. Keep that information in mind. Now, let's go to the recent past, around the middle of 2025. Russia had a clear objective to take the city of Pokrovsk. This isn't just another city on the map. Pokrovsk is the logistical heart of the Ukrainian defense in the Donetsk region. All supplies go through there. Ammunition, fuel, food, everything. If Russia takes Pokrovsk, the Ukrainian defensive line could easily collapse. But there was a problem, and his name is Shakhove. It's a small village located about 20 kilometers north of Pokrovsk. Shakhove is considered the anchor, the key to the Ukrainian defense in that region. If Ukrainians hold Shakhove, Pokrovsk stays safe. Russia knows this, and for almost a year they have been planning. Every new T-90M that rolled off the production line didn't go straight to the front. It went into storage, kept waiting. The Russians were building a massive strike force. I'm talking about 36 tanks and armored vehicles, and many of them were those feared T-90Ms, the best Russia had. There were also 40 soldiers on motorcycles and elite troops, Russian Marine brigades, trained soldiers. The plan was simple: crush Shakhove with brute force, take the village, and then fortify it. That way, Russia could use the location as a springboard for future attacks toward Pokrovsk. This was the attack that Russia had been holding back, the attack that would change everything. October 9th, 2025. The day has finally arrived. Russia chose a rainy day with heavy fog to attack. The reason? To hide the tank column from Ukrainian drones? Few people know, but drones don't work well in bad weather. At least that's what the Russians thought. The attack started in waves. First came the 40 motorcyclists. Yes, you heard that right. Motorcycles going straight for the Ukrainian lines sounds crazy. And it was, but there was a cruel logic behind it. The motorcyclists were the cannon fodder of Putin's grander strategy. They were there to make a sacrifice to trigger the mines. They would force the Ukrainians to spend ammunition and then reveal where the defensive positions were. After the motorcyclists, the main force would come. The 36 tanks and armored vehicles, and that included the precious T-90Ms. They would go through the weakened defenses and take Shakhove. At least, that was the plan. But the Ukrainians were waiting. The 225th Assault Regiment was in Shakhove, and they had reinforcements, the legendary veterans of the 1st Azov Corps, a unit with a fearsome reputation. And you know what else? The Ukrainians already knew about the attack, so the Russians lost the element of surprise. The fog ended up hiding nothing. The Ukrainians had built something the military calls a defense in depth. It wasn't just a line of trenches, it was a system. Layered minefields, barbed wire, anti-tank barriers called Dragon's Teeth, all designed to slow down and channel the Russian attack. And they also relied on lots of weapons, pre-positioned artillery, mines, and swarms of drones, first-person drones piloted manually. They're small, inexpensive, and lethal. The Russian motorcyclists went in first. And it was a massacre. The mines exploded, artillery rained down. Meanwhile, drones hunted the survivors. The first wave was wiped out in minutes. Then came the tanks, the T-90Ms, the best Russia had. They advanced in column, completely confident and protected by tons of relict armor, and they found hell. Mines immobilized the first vehicles. The column stopped, it got stuck. And when you're stopped on a modern battlefield, you're dead. Ukrainian artillery opened fire. The coordinates were already recorded. Every explosion was precise. And then came the drones, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Now. Remember the reverse speed of 4 kilometers per hour I mentioned? When a Western tank like the Abrams or the Leopard needs to retreat, it reverses at 40 kilometers per hour, fires, and pulls back quickly. It's known as the shoot and scoot tactic. The T-90M can't do that. After all, 4 kilometers per hour is way too slow. So the tank has to turn all the way around, expose its rear, and flee in a straight line. Exactly like you saw at the beginning of this video, the battle lasted all day. When the dust settled, the numbers were devastating for Russia. 3 tanks destroyed, 16 armored vehicles destroyed, 41 motorcycles destroyed, 107 Russian soldiers killed, 51 wounded. From an assault force planned for almost a year, most simply ceased to exist in less than a day. And it didn't end there. The Russian survivors retreated to the neighboring village of Volodymyrivka. They thought they would be safe there, but they were wrong. Throughout the night of October 9th and into October 10th, Ukrainian bomber drones hunted the survivors, one by one. The next morning, there were no more Russian forces in Volodymyrivka. A year of planning, the best tanks, elite troops, all destroyed in less than 24 hours. Now, I know many of you must be wondering at this point, but how did the best tank in the world fail so miserably? And the answer lies in philosophy and the way different countries think about tanks. Let's make a comparison. Take an American Abrams tank or a German Leopard 2. These tanks have 4 crew members. Their ammunition is stored in a separate compartment at the back of the turret, isolated from the crew by armored doors. If the ammunition explodes, and that can happen, special panels vent the blast upward and outward, away from the crew. The crew can survive and the tank can be recovered. Now look at the T-90M. 3 crew members, and the ammunition? It's stored in a carousel at the bottom of the crew compartment right underneath them. No separation means no protection. When a missile penetrates the T-90M and hits that ammunition, the explosion has nowhere to go but up. Through the crew, the pressure is so immense that the several-ton turret is literally ejected into the air. The military has a grim name for this. They call it the Jack-in-the-Box effect. A surprise box. Have you ever seen those photos of Russian tank turrets thrown meters away from the hull? That's basically it.
The crew has no chance.
Instant death. The tank is a total loss. And this wasn't a mistake or a design flaw when making these tanks. They really chose to do it this way. The Soviet philosophy was always focused on making small, low tanks that were hard to hit. 3 crew members mean a smaller turret, less weight, and more agility. But this comes at a cost. The crew is exposed and becomes completely expendable. The tank is also expendable. They were made to be mass-produced, used in large numbers, and lost in large numbers. Western tanks have a different philosophy. You need to save the crew at all costs. Training a crew takes years, so replace the tank if necessary, but bring the crew home. And there's more. Remember the red eyes? The electronic protection system we talked about earlier? It was designed to confuse older missiles from the 70s and 80s. But the reality nowadays is that this system is useless against a modern Javelin. The same goes for manually piloted first-person view drones. This happens because the drone doesn't use infrared sensors that can be detected. It relies on a human pilot looking through a camera. And here's something bizarre, a problem the Russians didn't expect. When the T-90M is hit in certain ways, the turret starts spinning uncontrollably, like a top. The soldiers lose control and can't aim, they can't fire. This happened in January 2024. A T-90M was repeatedly hit by American Bradley vehicles, 25mm automatic cannons. In theory, they shouldn't penetrate the armor of the T-90M, but the turret started to spin. The tank lost control, crashed into trees, and the crew abandoned the vehicle. It happened again in December of 2023. And first-person view drone hit a T-90M. The turret started to spin, and the crew abandoned it. May of 2024, same story. Analysts call this the spinning turret syndrome. It's probably a failure in the electronic fire control system. Maybe it's because of cheap components, or maybe a lack of shielding in the circuits. No one knows for sure, but here's the point. The best tank in the world shouldn't have this problem. It shouldn't be vulnerable to 25mm cannons. The crew shouldn't be sitting on top of the ammunition. As you can see, the T-90M is not a 21st century tank. It's a 90s tank with modern electronics slapped onto it. And in modern warfare, that's not enough. The proof of that happened on October 10th. One day after Shakhove, Russia tried again with another attack. Same area, 3 more tanks destroyed, 16 more armored vehicles destroyed. October 13th, they tried again. 3 more tanks destroyed, 13 more vehicles destroyed. In 1 week, Russia lost almost an entire brigade trying to take that village. The result? Shakhove remains in Ukrainian hands. Now let me tell you something that happened with India, because in 2019 they placed a big order. They bought 469 T-90 tanks. I'm talking about the export version, a deal valued at $2 billion. India was excited. After all, they would finally have modern tanks, but problems started to arise quickly. In 2017, during an international tank competition in Russia, the Indian T-90S failed repeatedly. They had mechanical problems and India lost the competition. Then user reports started coming in. Multiple problems were reported. Poor mobility on muddy terrain, difficulty climbing slopes, weak engine. Almost desperately, India had to take a drastic action. They rebuilt the tanks from scratch. They installed a new Indian engine and a new fire control system, also Indian. And here is the most ironic part of all. They added an active protection system of Swedish origin because the Russian system didn't work. Because of this, in 2022, even before the large-scale invasion of Ukraine, India had already cancelled plans for future purchases of the T-90. They decided to look for Western alternatives like the French Leclerc. Think about that. One of Russia's biggest clients, a longtime ally, simply gave up on the T-90 even before the war showed how bad it really was. Putin called the T-90M Proryev, which means breakthrough. This would be the tank that would break through Ukrainian lines, that would change the course of the war. But in Shakhove, the only thing that broke was the expectation. The expectation that heavy armor and powerful weapons can still win wars on their own. The expectation that propaganda can replace reality. The truth couldn't be more different. The T-90M is not the best tank in the world, not even close. It is in fact a monument to an era that no longer exists. An era where tanks could dominate battlefields. Where lives were disposable, where quantity prevailed over quality. That era is over. Modern warfare ignores your paper specifications. It doesn't care how many millions you spent. It doesn't care what you call your tank. Modern warfare is transparent, it's precise, it's deadly. A $500 drone, piloted by a soldier in a trench, can destroy a $4.5 million tank. A well-placed minefield is worth more than an armored brigade. And a well-prepared defense, with motivated soldiers and proper technology, can stop any attack, no matter how powerful it seems. Russia learned this the hard way and will keep learning it. Because the T-90Ms will keep being sent and will keep being destroyed. Now I want to hear from you. In your opinion, can any tank be considered invincible in modern warfare? Leave your answer in the comments. And if this video made you think differently about military propaganda, share it with your friends and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. See you next time.